Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. And this week is Celebrate Catholic Schools Week. And so in honor of that, we updated and are resharing our enrollment guide for schools in San Antonio from the Archdiocese. And we have also to celebrate that, we have two special guests, and they are both products of Catholic education and moms of students in Catholic schools. So let me introduce our guests. So in the middle of the screen is Laura MacGregor Peña. So she herself went through many years of Catholic education. She's a native of San Antonio. So she went to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. She went to Antonian College Prep and then on to college at the University of Notre Dame. And also with us this afternoon, Mary Valdez, and she's also a San Antonio native. She went to Our Lady of Guadalupe, Westside Catholic, and then also Providence Catholic School. And her daughter is now a student at Providence, and her son is a proud student at Central Catholic High School. So I'm super proud to have these guests to share about the parent perspective on Catholic education as we celebrate Catholic Schools Week. Thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask both of you to share about your perspective on the benefits of Catholic education. And I'm sure we could talk for like the entire half hour just about this, but if you could kind of share some of the high points for parents who are maybe kind of weighing the pros and cons.
I have several things, but I think just, to kind of focus, a big thing with Catholic school education is obviously the value system. It's just ingrained in the schools. It's not necessarily, a part of the curriculum. It's kind of just the environment and the atmosphere that is created by being a Catholic school and a Christian school. It just helps to foster development of good character and just good human beings. There's a big focus on, kind of related to that value system, a big focus on volunteerism and community service, which, like I said, was ingrained in me from elementary school through college. And so it's just a part of my life now, and now becoming a part of my daughter's life. Smaller classes, another very big benefit. So you get, more attention from teachers. You, I think among the students, you kind of develop a better sense of camaraderie. And then again, that sense of community among the students, but also among the community overall with the parents and teachers. Diversity is another one. You're not limited to students within a particular geographic footprint. You get students from all over the city, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, and it really helps to foster just a very unique and rich learning environment. And finally, I think affordability is something that people don't realize with Catholic schools, is that Catholic schools, particularly in San Antonio, are surprisingly affordable, especially when you compare to what you were probably paying for daycare before they had to start school. Most of them are less than what daycare costs. So, and St. Mary Magdalen, where my daughter attends, is actually one of the most affordable in San Antonio.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so I'm going to put Mary on screen and ask you the same question about the benefits of Catholic education from a parent perspective.
All right. So I will echo everything that Laura mentioned about the value system and really just having your kids be among families, or I'm going to say kids in classrooms that have the same values that your family holds, especially when it comes to the faith perspective, because that is something that we go to church on Sundays, but there's something different about being in the classroom and having a religious class and praying daily intentions for whatever you have going on with your friends, your family. There's just something about having that faith component in the classroom. And then, of course, having it, for all your activities, prayers before games, prayers before any type of testing, or just daily prayers when you're there at school. The sense of community is really big in the Catholic school. I will tell you this: my kids went to St. Paul before Providence and Central, and there's one thing that you'll always find people saying is that there's nothing like the St. Paul community, right? Because that's a big deal. Well, that same sense of community carries on to Providence, and my son's a freshman, only been there for a few months, right? Because the school year is halfway through. But we found that same sense of community at Central, and we've definitely found that at Providence. It's a second home for my kids, and the families that you meet and the families that you bond with, the students. I have students out of my daughter's grades that come up and tell me hi, or how's Sarah? How are you doing? The teachers. It's just a very, very different world. I've never been to a public school, so in fairness, I really don't know, but I have to say that I can't imagine, life in any other education system for my kids.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I'm really grateful to get this this parent perspective. But I also want to hear from both of y'all. Like Mary, you mentioned that you had gone through Catholic school the whole way. So actually, I mean, both of y'all did. So I was wondering if you could kind of share, things you remember from your own experience and like how that has influenced you as a parent. So let me send it to Mary first.
Sure. So the funny thing is that, in all my kids' years of being in school, whether it be elementary, middle, of course now in high school, I can recall my parents being involved, at homeroom parents or PTC meetings or whatever that looks like. And, getting to know the siblings of my friends and their families and their grandmothers and so forth. And those are things I remember. Of course, having your school masses, having different activities that are tied to the liturgical calendars, whatever was going on in our church, we were also celebrating or, honoring those things in our school, in our daily religious activities. And so I see the generation continuing where I'm now that parent that I used to see in my homeroom, my friend's mom or my mom that used to bring us snacks every testing period, or Halloween parties or Christmas parties or school masses. What I really love, and I used to see this a lot, is if my parents couldn't go to mass to see me read when I was a kid, my friends' parents were there or other parents were there to tell me, hey, good job. You did great. I told your mom, and now, just fast forward to now, we have friends that send us pictures if we can't be there. So it's just to see that tradition carrying on, and then having that relationship with, your clergy, right? You have your nuns and your priests that come on campus and having them participate. Those are the things I treasured growing up. And so now I get to see that living through my children as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. So I'm going to put Laura on the screen. Laura, can you share about your experience coming up through Catholic education?
Yes, of course.
Since you went to multiple schools, right? Our Lady of Perpetual Help, Antonian, and then on to college as well.
Yes. It's interesting because I'm the youngest of 4 children, and all 4 of us went to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. So kind of like Mary was saying, I mean, people get to know the families. They don't just know one student, and you're definitely not a number. Everyone knows you by name. All the teachers know you. You usually got your brother or your sister teacher when it was your turn to go through, and they kind of had some expectations based on what they experienced with your sibling. And then 3 of us went to Antonian, so that kind of, like Mary was saying, continued on through. But also, I did not grow up in a household that attended church regularly. So going to Catholic school was really my opportunity to go to Mass and to really learn the things that, not that I wasn't learning at home, I was learning the values, but I just wasn't learning the detail behind the church. That void was kind of filled by being able to go to Catholic school. But yeah, just that sense of guidance and support that you get from having such a deep sense of community in those schools to kind of supplement, your home life was pretty consistent for each school for me. And what I feel like I got out of that education from each school, it's kind of interesting because at each point in your life, you're definitely, at each age, you're going through something a little bit different. You're developing differently and going through different life experiences. And while there was a consistency of support and guidance, obviously there were unique experiences that I needed some different guidance on. And I always felt that I had a support system there within the school.
Yeah. So it supports and complements what's happening in the family home. Yeah. Well, Laura, I have you on screen. I want to ask you the next question, and then it'll be Mary's turn. But I want you to share more specifically. So you mentioned that your daughter is currently at St. Mary Magdalen School, and I was wondering if you could like talk more about like her experience at that particular school, like not just Catholic education in general, but like that's a really interesting campus, right? Because it's dual language, and
Yes.
like it's located on the west side, and yeah. So if you could talk more about St. Mary Magdalen School.
Yes. So just to kind of give a little background on how we even ended up at St. Mary Magdalen. Obviously, like you said in the beginning, I'm a native of San Antonio, grew up in Catholic schools. So I was very familiar with Catholic schools around the city. And we weren't really considering St. Mary Magdalen when it was time to choose kindergarten. We probably admittedly had some misconceptions about what the school had to offer. And we had our children at the Pineapple School, which is a dual, a Spanish immersion daycare facility. And our children learning Spanish was just really important to us. We don't speak Spanish at home. Our extended families do, but my husband and I don't. And we recognize the benefits of being bilingual. And so there was actually a connection through Pineapple School with Mr. Daly, who is the principal of St. Mary Magdalen. So we had kind of heard about it, but we still were like, no, we're going to go with Northside. We're going to do public school for elementary, and we're going to try that. We're in a great district. Let's stick with it. The process for trying to get into the dual language program for Northside was it wasn't a very, I didn't feel good about it. It was just kind of like, well, wait and see. You're gonna have to wait to the first day of school to see if your child gets in. And I didn't like that. I'm like, I don't want her to start one school and then have to change a week later and go to a new school. She's already having to start a brand new school. This is scary. So probably 2 weeks before school started, we called and scheduled a tour, and that sealed the deal for us. Mr. Daly is an amazing principal. A school is very much who the principal is. I mean, the principal is the leader of the school. And just listening to him and hearing what he's been doing with the school, we just knew it was the right place for our daughter. So we sent her day one. I was nervous. She didn't skip a beat. She was like, bye, Mom. I'll see ya. She has been loving it. The dual language is great. And it's pretty amazing because, like I said, we don't speak Spanish at home, but she is in the Spanish classes where the majority of the classes are taught in Spanish. And her teacher has told us, you guys don't speak Spanish at home? I'm like, no. She says, well, she speaks like a native speaker. I'm like, oh, good. It's working. So, and she, very much like what you see in Catholic schools in general. I mean, everyone's involved in everything and everyone knows everyone. And my daughter is perfect for that. She wants to know everybody. She wants to know what's going on. And it's the perfect environment for her.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, that's something I'm going to touch on later too, is more about like activities, and for you, Laura and Mary, how you're involved in those activities, that engagement, that enrichment. Okay, so I'm going to put Mary on the big screen and ask specifically about, so your daughter is at Providence right now. I see the Providence sign behind you. That's awesome. And then your son is at Central Catholic, but they both have come up through Catholic schools as well. So you can comment on not just Central Catholic and Providence, the high school experience, but also like the broader. But yeah, if you could share stories from your family's experience having kids in San Antonio Catholic schools.
Yes, definitely. So I'm going to be very honest with you. My husband, when we started private school, he's a product of public school education. And he's one that was like, no, we don't need to pay for that. We have a accredited school down the street, all this stuff. And I was like, no, that's not an option for our kids. I know what it's like. And I will say, when we had our daughter, she's the oldest, she's a senior now. And when she started at St. Paul, again, going back to that community aspect and just seeing the education that she was getting at St. Paul. And then Laura, you mentioned, having the teachers that, it's such a close-knit community that the teachers got to know my son at the time, who was, little Bubba, who was like 3, maybe 2 at the time. And, just him seeing the dynamic of the classrooms, the ratio, and just the higher expectations. And he bought in, and he was like, okay, that's it. I'm sold. We can't send him anywhere else. And so it's, having that St. Paul family, because that's what we call it, the St. Paul family, really it convinced him and showed him the light, if you will. And so again, my son, you mentioned it, being a sibling of my daughter, the teachers were like, oh man, he's so different than your daughter. Because he was a lot more outgoing. My daughter's a little more quiet. Well, fast forward to high school, and the very opposite now. She's probably more outgoing than he is. But again, it's just how they mold your kids. They help you. It's a partnership between the families and the administration, and then the other families that are influencing and having those virtues just kind of helped with that. So anyhow, coming back to our experience, the experience at St. Paul was wonderful. And you see a lot of those same themes at all the other places, like St. James or St. Luke's. You that same community, the values, all of that. Whether it be St. Paul, St. Mary Magdalene, St. James, all of those schools, they all offer the same components, right? And so in our experience at Providence and Central, the same thing. My daughter found her home. She loved it. There's a place for everyone. And that's the thing about private schools as well, or Catholic schools in particular. There's a place for everyone. If you like art, okay, there's art for you. If you like sports, there's sports for you. And, in particular with Providence, there's a sisterhood, right? And I say that knowing that I went there, yes. But my daughter, she has friends in all different activities, friends who are of different grade levels, and they look out for each other. I have she's a senior who hangs out with a freshman, when they're at the color guard, when they're part of the band. And so when they're hanging out in the color guard room, she's hanging out with freshmen. And to her, those are her little sisters, and same thing when she was a freshman, she had a lot of upperclassmen who were welcoming her and hanging out with her and just making her feel like she was a part of something different. Right. And same with my son, and as I mentioned, my son's a little more reserved. At Central, he's not an athlete, but he's an ROTC. And I will tell you, he has friends in all different grade levels. He's loving Central. Central has this amazing brotherhood. And it's real. It's a real thing, and my son's not one to come out of his shell and say, okay, it's a brotherhood, but he really does feel that and experience that. And I truly believe in all Catholic schools, you have that sense of family, whether it be brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it. That's that sense of family. And that's what we have experienced at all of the schools that we've been at.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I appreciate the detail about how, each child is experiencing, and, even if like siblings can be so different from each other, but they're both finding their place at their respective campuses. Mm-hmm. So, Mary, since I've got you on screen, but I want to ask both of y'all this question. Like activities and like parent involvement. So like Mary, you mentioned like your daughter does color guard, your son does ROTC, but I'm sure this has been throughout their education that there's opportunities for parent involvement. Like you mentioned, like it might be your mom, it might be your friend's parents, who bring the snacks. And, so how does that parent involvement kind of build the school culture at Catholic schools and kind of reinforce like teaching the virtues and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. So a lot of the schools, we've been at, obviously St. Paul and Providence and Central now, they have, parent teacher clubs where you can either volunteer in many different ways, right? You can volunteer to hold an office, you can volunteer to chair a committee or chair an event, or you can just be behind the scenes. I can't donate money, but I want to donate time, right? And at Providence, I'm part of the Providence Community Association board. So we try to get parents in, even if it's just showing up to our meetings and having some fellowship with us while we plan the next event. That we love that and we encourage that. At Central, I attended my first parent club meeting last night as part of our band booster club. And it was so much fun. Like again, going back to that feeling like you're a part of something big. It doesn't mean you have to commit the whole year. It doesn't mean you have to commit, to run an event, because not everybody's comfortable with that. But you have the opportunity to commit on your comfort level and what you can commit or what you can't commit, that you just let them know how you can be there for them. There's athletic booster associations, athletic boosters, there's band boosters, fine arts boosters. There's different types of ways you can contribute. You can be a classroom parent. There's so many different ways you can help with being involved.
Yeah. And the more involved you are, the more you have a sense of what's happening at the school community that,
You
right,
do.
that,
And then your
yeah.
kids also get involved with you. So then they start going to the activities and events, and, they start seeing mom or dad volunteering, and then they start picking up those same virtues as far as giving time, having that servant's heart, and so forth. So it's just a win-win.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to put Laura on screen. Laura, can you share about parent involvement at your kids' school? So, like in particular at St. Mary Magdalen.
Yes, I definitely couldn't agree more with everything that Mary was saying. I mean, I think that a pretty consistent theme across all of the Catholic schools. But speaking from personal experience, a couple of ways that my husband and I have gotten really involved is through CYO, and that's, of course, available to all schools. And my husband, is an attorney with a very demanding schedule. So when he signed up to coach, I thought, okay, if he can do it with his schedule, I need to do something. So I volunteered to be a class parent, and my goal there was to make sure that I was having really regular communication with the teacher and helping to facilitate communication between the teacher and the rest of the parents. I mean, how can if I as a parent want a certain level of communication, what can I do to help push that along for all the other parents to make sure they're getting what I want and what I think they want to. So that's one way that we've really gotten involved. Additionally, St. Mary Magdalen specifically this year created something called the Maverick Action Committee. So it's kind of a revamped version of a parent-teacher association, but at the very beginning of the year, they sent out kind of a survey for people to fill out and let them know what types of events we might be interested in volunteering with. I was so new, I wasn't really sure what I was signing up for, but I'm very glad I filled it out because that was just some of the things that I've, volunteered for, like the Hope for the Future 5K. There were a group of us that just got really close and did a lot of work on that for the school and for the Hope for the Future organization. So that was a nice way to just get really involved. But I think outside of myself, thinking about other parents, you just have to ask yourself what your goal of involvement is. Is it just, your time is limited and you just want to make sure that you're involved with your student and how your student is performing? There's a way to volunteer that accomplishes that goal. If your goal is to help your student's class, there's a way to do things to just get involved with the class. If your goal is to help the school overall, there's something for you to do there. I think there's just a wide variety of things to do and ways to get involved. And, like I said at the beginning, one of the benefits of the Catholic school systems is the fact that community service and volunteerism is very much ingrained in the system. And that goes for the school itself also, volunteering within the school, not just doing, community service projects.
Yeah. You mentioned Hope for the Future, and I know that's an organization that does events in the community, like you mentioned the 5K, and there's the khaki and plaid ball, but the goal is raising money for scholarships to make, as you mentioned earlier, that Catholic schools are more affordable than most people would expect as far as there being private schools. But and you mentioned that the students at Catholic schools are diverse. They come from all walks of life. So it's not just a select elite group of kids. It's, kids are interacting with people from all parts of town and getting to know their city better in that way.
Yes, actually, just to follow up on that point, just to reiterate how affordable Catholic schools are. I came from, my mother was a single mother, so raising 4 kids on her own, you could understand that it would be very difficult for her to afford Catholic school for 4 kids. But we went because of financial aid and assistance. I went to all colleges or all schools with the help of financial aid, and that would not, people don't realize it's possible. There are opportunities available for everyone.
Yeah. And I guess me speaking as HR moms, like, my advice to families is you don't know until you ask, right? If you don't apply, the process doesn't even get started. So that's the important thing is just to take that first step. But don't do what Laura did and wait until 2 weeks before school starts, right?
Don't do that.
Okay, so I want to ask, let's see, Laura, since I have you on screen, I was wondering if you could, is there a particular like story or example you can share that talks about like school culture at St. Mary Magdalene, like whether it's about faith formation or kind of character development, things like that?
A personal kind of concrete example that I have, again, I'm still pretty new to getting back into the Catholic school system in San Antonio with my daughter, now in kindergarten at St. Mary Magdalene, but getting involved with the Hope for the Future 5K fundraising kind of reminded me and reiterated what we've been talking about this whole session, is that sense of family and community. I really didn't know much of the history about the fundraising for that event, but the community just came together in a really big way, and broke a lot of fundraising records for Hope for the Future overall, definitely for the school, but for Hope for the Future overall. And it was just very moving to see how people, when you share with them what's going on, how we're doing against other schools, that kind of sense of competition really kicks in and people really step up. I mean, it was just really moving to see that and to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so now it's Mary's turn. Mary, I want to ask you kind of the same question. Like, do you have like stories or examples you can share about, the school culture at Catholic schools, like, and whether it's on, the community service aspect, faith formation, character development, things like that?
I think it kind of touches on all of them. It's the traditions that you find at the respective school that you go to, right? We've learned so much at Central about traditions and, the brotherhood and all the different things that make being a part of the Central Catholic organization special. I feel like I've talked about Providence a lot. That's why I try to share the wealth. But in Providence as well, as I mentioned, the sisterhood, there's a lot of traditions that you have. We have like our mother-daughter luncheons, a mother-daughter liturgy and luncheon. Let me make sure I mention that. We have our mass in the stands, and Central has so many, events just like that it makes that school unique, but then it also, again, contributes to the faith formation, the community building of the community, but then also, it makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. St. Paul had a ton of them as well. In particular, when it came to faith formation at St. Paul, they had the Passion Play put on by the 8th graders. And so it's just one of those things that even as maybe a 6th or 7th grader, you looked forward to that because that was the opportunity to, showcase, okay, this is the passion of our Lord. This is what we need to be grateful for. And it just hits home on so many different levels. All these different traditions and the different components that make up these schools unique, and they all have different traditions.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go back to kind of Brady Bunch mode on the screen here. But you both have shared such wonderful stories about your experience growing up, about your kids' experience growing up, and I know you have like kids at different stages, but but a lot of common experiences as far as the community service and faith formation and traditions. And but I hope that families seeing the blog post and, watching this interview are getting curious about Catholic schools, and maybe they didn't think it was for them, or they thought maybe things had changed since they grew up, but maybe they'll take a closer look. So do either of you want to offer advice, like how families can research about Catholic schools? Obviously they should go to schartermoms.com and see our enrollment guide, but there's more resources out there that, and like next steps that families can take.
For me, I think I would absolutely recommend scheduling tours. We toured 3 schools, 1 public and 2 Catholic, and that's what sold us on where we ended up. Pay attention to who's giving you the tour, what they're talking about, how they're presenting the information. Don't just take the information at face value like a resume. I mean, see how it's implemented and how involved they really are. You learn a lot about the school is the people in it, not the building. So you really need to get in there and meet the people and see who your student is going to be around to help you make a decision.
Yeah. And I would recommend following them on social media. A lot of the schools, they post a lot of activities, recognitions and accolades that their students, accomplish throughout the year. Events, if there's any community events, I know, Central has some, Central and Providence both have some events coming up for Fiesta. And those there's individual pages typically have like the event, date and time and so forth, or how to buy tickets. I would say just watching their social just to see, to Laura's point, how many people, I'm sorry, who are the kids that your kids would go to school with? Who are the people that you would see there? And that's where you see a lot of it. It's all organic or things that they've accomplished. And that's where you start to get to know the personalities of the school, what they have to offer, what accomplishments they have. And then, of course, when they have events, if you can try to go to any of the events, that would be great. And then usually at the events, they have some sort of a recruiting table set up where you can do a tour on the spot, or they have pamphlets available and things like that. But definitely follow social in addition to scheduling the tours.
Well, Mary, that's a perfect lead in, because on our blog post, we have a list of like from the Archdiocese, a list of the schools in the Archdiocese, which it's broad because it's all the way from Kerrville out to Seguin. Like it's a big area. But we have links to the social media profiles of a bunch of schools. And I agree. Awesome. It's a great way to get insight into, and like they do such a good job of communicating about what they're doing. Like they'll do a Facebook Live during Mass, and you can see, young kids like taking communion, and so many events that are tied to, the religious calendar, but also Fiesta. And what a great idea to those events are opening the school community to the public, welcoming the public in. And it's a great opportunity because like Laura said, like you want to meet the people. It's the people that make the school or that make the church, and that's how you'll find, like, is this the place where we feel like we want to be part of this community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, I'm going to put it up on screen one more time. So sacatholicschools.org is the website managed by the Archdiocese that has like official information about enrolling, but so much of it is handled at the kind of parish and campus level. So like Laura said, reach out and find out when you can tour, and then, listen, with open ears, but, be a little bit skeptical, right? Like, and just make sure that, that you feel you're getting your questions answered and you feel comfortable with the people who are going to be helping shape your children. And like Mary said, who are the kids that they're going to be going to school with?
Yep.
Well, good. Well, do you want to offer any kind of final thoughts before we wrap up the interview?
Go Mavericks.
Go Titans and go Providence.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Because like it's all about the school spirit. Yeah. I love that Mary brought props.
I did. Proud mama.
Yeah. And Laura, it looks like you have some kid art in your office too.
I do. Yes. This was my daughter made this at school for Christmas.
Oh, it's so cute.
So, yeah.
That's perfect.
I try and hang stuff around when I can.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I feel like this has given like a much fuller picture about what Catholic education means for families and for students than just what I can put in the blog post. So you really bring these stories to life. So thank you, Mary. Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate your help.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.